Hey guys, so I wanted to go through last week's assignment with you guys. Now, from what I'm seeing, everyone's kind of just hitting the nail straight on the head with this idea of symbolism, and that, things can mean more than, sort of what they appear to mean, and, that an object or a picture can really take on more meaning than what it is on the surface. So, I asked you guys to take a look at, I gave you that brief definition. Symbolism is the use of symbols or items to represent an idea or quality. I try to break it down into a very simple language, but basically the idea that, the one that we're going to look at right now is this idea of a rose. This is going to be me trying to draw a rose. Oh man, yeah, my art, guys. This is what I need to focus on during quarantine. That's not a rose. You all know what a rose looks like. So, this idea that the rose, yes, well, it is a flower. It can mean more than just being a flower. It can have an idea and a quality to it that kind of expresses a belief in something, in some sort of, system, or, in a belief of some kind. Okay, I am rambling. There's my beautiful rose. I tried, guys. I really tried. Okay, so for this one, I asked you guys to take a look at the definition and then to watch this video that talked a little bit about symbols. And it gave you an idea that sometimes an item can just be an item, right? So they had that idea of, it was Disney. I love Disney. Disney uses a lot of really good storytelling techniques that we can kind of go back to. And they're stories that you guys are familiar with. But for example, right, they had, a picture of like a pig, and it was just the animal as a pig. And then, in the story, a pig might take on a different kind of meaning, a different kind of character, a different kind of symbol. And so sometimes, an object can just be an object. Sometimes a rose is just something that you pass by on the street, and, give a nice sniff to and say, oh, it's a beautiful flower. And sometimes it can mean a little bit more. So, I gave you guys a poem, one of my favorite poems, by Tupac Shakur, a rapper who, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but wrote beautiful poetry, and kind of wanted you guys to see that, poetry is all around us always. I know I said that last week, or did I say that last week? I've been saying it in a lot of classes, but poetry is always around us. Rap music is a great example of poetry, but this right here, this poem that I've given you guys is exactly that. It's a poem written by Shakur, not part of his music, but, it's very much, he was a rapper who also created beautiful songs and poems in his music. So let's take a look at kind of what we're getting here with this idea. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the poem. So we start, obviously, from the title. So in any kind of reading assignment, I'm going to ask you guys to start with this title. Actually, let me write this below so I have enough room. Okay, so the title is The Rose That Grew from the Concrete. Now we're jumping feet first into this kind of idea of figurative language, and so we have, the rose is representing something here, and it's a flower growing from, concrete. I'm going to make just a very basic flower. One day I will learn to draw, guys. One day. Okay, so we have this rose growing from this place that is not typically somewhere where a rose would grow. It's growing in concrete. You can tell I like color. It's growing in concrete. So first thing that kind of comes off the bat, so it's growing in an unusual spot. That's not how you spell usual. Whew, can you guys tell it's Friday? Unusual spot. A rose needs so many things in order to grow, right? So we're having difficulty finding, I'm going to put nourishment, right? Nourishment in terms of like, there's no soil. Where we have concrete, typically we're in a city. Maybe we don't have so much of an access to the sun, right? Because the sun is might be blocked out by buildings, right? So we don't have that kind of nourishment. Usually in soil we'll also have things like vitamins and minerals, which flowers need to grow. So we don't have that kind of that nourishment for it to grow, but somehow it did. So it's, you know, showing us that there's something kind of maybe strong or odd about this sort of rose that's growing. Okay, that's just the title, right? The rose that grew from the concrete. That's kind of where I got that from. The next thing I'm going to take a look at is the author. Okay, we always read slowly when we're doing active reading, right? We don't jump straight into the poem. So Tupac Shakur, what do I know about him? So far, well, I know that he's a rapper. I know that he stood up for kind of that kind of like black, well, kind of like that Black Lives Matter sort of mentality. It didn't exist back then, that slogan, but it's that same idea, right? That idea that like empowerment of minorities, the empowerment and the kind of oppression and the hardship that these people were facing. He was very much kind of really into that idea of like, we need to bring this to the forefront. We need to show how much we matter. You know, and he talked about the wrongs that people went through. So I know that that's probably going to be a little bit in this poem because this author has this kind of idea present in a lot of his songs and probably also in his poetry. Okay, so now that I know a little bit about him, I know that, you know, rapper, we might have kind of like a song-like feel to this. We know a little bit about the title. Now we're going to jump into what the poem is about. Okay, so let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, that's as big as it will let me go. Okay. So, can I make this smaller? There we go. Did you hear about the rose that grew from the crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from the concrete when no one else ever cared. Okay. Nice short poem, but a lot being said here. So I think the first one was, what does the rose represent in this poem? Now we've seen it a few times. Did you hear about the rose that grew from the crack in the concrete? Now if we're talking about a crack in the concrete, we know the concrete has no nourishment. So a crack would mean we have very little nourishment, but there's an opportunity to grow. So it's going to be something that's going to be very hardy, very strong. You know, this strong will to live. Okay. Proving nature's law is wrong. Right? This idea of laws, and laws are something that, you know, Shakur would have been very much in tune with, this idea of society's laws, right? Like U.S. laws are saying very much like how people are supposed to live. But nature has a law, right? And sometimes laws, showing that laws are meant to be broken. Oop. Can I? No, I'll do it. Laws are meant to be broken in some ways, right? That they're not always perfect. I'm going to come back to this kind of idea of the U.S. in a second, but that laws are not always perfect, that sometimes, you know, they aren't right and they are not just. So this rose grew and it learned to walk without having feet. Here again we have this idea of personification, right? Because a rose cannot walk, so we're giving it kind of human-like attributes of being able to walk. And it also has dreams, right? So again, we're showing that this is kind of, this rose is symbolizing a type of person because it is breathing fresh air, it is walking, it is having dreams. So we kind of get this idea through making this rose into a symbol of a person, that is a specific kind of person, right? And we're talking about a person that nobody else ever really cared about. Very sad, very, very sad. But knowing a little bit about Shakur and knowing a little bit about kind of where he's coming from, you guys kind of all hit this on the head, this idea that the rose is symbolizing, like the African American people. Or, sorry, I can't spell and speak at the same time. In the US, right? This idea that there's these people and they're like the rose that grew from the concrete, and the concrete very much would be, where these people are growing up, it would be in very poverty-stricken areas where we'd have, a lot of concrete around, this idea of it's like this oppressive sort of place that these people are growing up. But even if you give like a little hope for life, right? We get this kind of beautiful rose or this beautiful person growing out of somewhere that, doesn't give it a lot of nourishment, doesn't give it a lot of chance of survival, but this person is surviving, right? Even if, the nature's laws are saying that they can't, they can, right? And the U.S. laws, the way that it's written, the more that you study kind of the idea of poverty going into the future, unfortunately, a lot of our societies, they're not as protective of people who are living in poverty, which is sad. But, especially around Shakur's time, this would have been something where, he would have really kind of looked at the government and said, you're not supporting us, and the way that you make the laws aren't fair to us, and they're just keeping us poor. And he's kind of speaking out against that, and he says even in this situation when we're being oppressed, people are growing from this. Beautiful things are coming out of this. So we kind of got that idea. You guys, I don't think I saw one that was wrong when we're talking about question 1 about what the idea of the rose representing in this poem. Now, I asked you the question of why did you think Shakur chose to use a symbol of a rose rather than another object, right? He could have used anything for this. He could have used the tree that grew from the concrete, or the dandelion that grew from the concrete, because that's usually what you would see is a dandelion rather than a rose. And I think I got a lot of really great responses for this one. But when we're taking a look at the idea of a rose, right? A rose is something that is desirable. Valentine's Day, you give out roses. You don't give out dandelions. There's something that is beautiful. It's also, something that kind of shows that ability that something beautiful and something great and something amazing can come out of situations that are so, like the crack in the concrete, that are so hard to get by, right? So that it's possible for beauty to be anywhere. It's possible for something growing up in a place with no nourishment, we could still have this amount of beauty, which I think is a great symbol, right? He's really kind of driving home that idea that beauty can be found anywhere. Okay, so like I said, you guys all kind of really hit the nail on the head with the hammer. I'm going to be a better drawer by the end of this, guys. That's my idea of what a hammer looks like. You guys kind of all hit that idea straight on. So, great on all of you guys for that. I just kind of wanted to go over that. And obviously we can, analyze this poem a lot more, but I think that's kind of a beautiful place to end it. And it's a beautiful message from Shakur, and it was just one of my favorite poems. Okay, going into, let's choose pink. Sure, why not pink? Question number 3. Logos are types of symbols that we see in our everyday lives. The logo represents more than just the company, but also the ideas of what the company stands for, being sporty, being cool, freedom. So I asked you to find a logo that you often see in your life and copy and paste it below, if you are able to, and explain what ideas the logo represents. Now, I think I wrote this a little bit confusing. If you were not able to copy and paste the logo, you could still tell me what the logo is, especially if it's a popular company. You could say something like, I am choosing the logo for Instagram. I cannot copy it, but I'll talk about it here, because I can still look them up. So let's take a look at, and I chose Instagram, this idea of symbolism. Now, you guys did that kind of mask activity. That's That's my idea of a mask. Yep, there we go. There's the mask. You did that mask activity where I asked you guys to find images for each of them, right? That idea of good and bad. And I asked you guys to find symbols to represent sort of who you are. Oh, that mask is looking creepy now. Of who you are, or who some characters might be, you know, and that idea of good and bad. Because we all have good and bad parts of ourselves, and that's kind of what Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was getting at. But this idea of kind of good and bad and what that means, well, symbols are something that are very important. And so I asked you guys to continue on this idea of symbolism to look at a logo. So let's take a quick peek at this logo and show you kind of what I was thinking about in terms of looking at the symbolism of that. So Instagram right here. So what is this photo? This photo is of a camera, right? So it's going to be kind of this idea of pictures, and I haven't done this before, so you're hearing how I'm going to be thinking through this whole process. So we have a camera, we have pictures. This is kind of the daily documentation. Of our lives. The idea of the colors that were being chosen show kind of the idea of the filters that they have in Instagram. You know, I like that it's a very simplistic logo, kind of has that idea of it's simple to use, right? There's nothing complex about it, and the logo is showing us that by having nice clean lines. And you know, I like the colors and the filters. It can also show that there's, you know, everything under the rainbow. Sort of an expression, right? That you can find anything on Instagram, that it's all around, that they're pictures and kind of inspiration for everyday life. So this is kind of just what I see when I think of this idea of Instagram. The symbol of this one right here shows me a little bit about what the company's about, right? That it's showing us this kind of documentation of our lives, that it's always around and simple to use. It has everything that you could ever want in it. And it shows, you know, the possibilities of what we can see and the beauty and what we can see it in. So those are sort of the things that I think of when I see this sort of idea. Or you can even take a look at another famous logo. We'll do one more. Is Nike. Okay, for me, this symbol represents being sporty. The logo represents the just do it attitude. The no complaining. Right, this kind of tough guy, that kind of swoosh thinking, right? That you know, you practice so much that it just becomes easy. You just do it. It's one motion. It's fluid. You know, there's this idea of strength. When we look at this symbol, we see this symbol as something of you know, wanting to be like the people who wear it. So, you know, like that, not just sporty, but like that idea of like a sports person, right? Who makes a lot of money, and you know, depending on where you buy your Nike stuff from, it can sometimes be expensive, but this idea of money and wealth and sports, you know, this attitude of just do it. It's very much like you put in a lot of training, and so, you know, you're someone who is strong. That is not a bicep. That's not an arm. Whew. Someone who is strong. There we go. Someone who is strong, you know, someone who's capable, somebody who is willing to go that extra mile. And so that's kind of what that little swoosh, every time that you put on those clothes, is that you're trying to emulate that idea. You're trying to show that, you know, yeah, I am someone who, you know, just does it, and, you know, I don't complain about it, and I'm strong, and I'm sporty, and one day I'm going to make all this money, and, you know, that is what I want to show when I'm wearing all these labels. Okay, so we'll continue on with a little bit of idea of symbolism and figurative language as we continue on. I hope that this kind of helps kind of dip your toe into the world of symbolism, into poetry, and introduces you to a beautiful poem. And if you have any other questions, continue to keep reaching out, guys. I've had a couple of you reach out, and I'm hoping that, you know, some of these tools that I'm giving you are helping out. This is all new to me too, so, you know, if something isn't working, let me know, please. You can email me, you can write it in YouTube if you are one of my students. You can write it in Microsoft Teams. You know, send me a message somewhere, say, I need help, I don't get this, could you make a video could we have a video chat, and we'll set up some times and we'll work around it. But keep on being awesome, and yeah, you guys are awesome. All right.